I will now take the sediment for this meeting of the Planning Committee held on the 9th of May 2023. The following members are present: Councillors Alec Allison, Ralph Barker, Archie Buchanan, Ross Clark, Jerry Convery, Margaret Cowie. We have apologies from Councillor Maureen Devlin, and Councillor Bert Thompson is attending as a substitute. Councillor Mary Donnelly is present. Councillor Joe Fagan is not present. I have apologies from Councillor Gladys Ferguson Miller. Councillor Elise Frame is not present. Fellow members are present: Councillors Alistair Fulton, Shalene Handybod, Mark Horsham, Ross Lambie. With apologies from Councillor Monique McAdams. Councillor Leslie MacDonald is present. Councillor David McLaughlin is not present. The following members are present: Councillors Richard Nelson, Norman Ray, John Ross, Graham Scott, David Shearer, Helen Toner and David Watson. Thank you, and I'll pass you back to the Chair for today's business.
Thank you, Stuart. Straight on to the business. Agenda item number 1, any declarations of interest? Councillor MacDonald.
Declaring interest on item 11. I know the agent.
Thank you, Councillor MacDonald. Just like you know, just before we come to the agenda item, just to leave, and then we'll invite you back in when the item is concluded. Any other declarations of interest? No. Agenda item number 2, minutes of previous meeting. I'll move these as a correct and accurate minute.
I'll second that.
All agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Agenda item number 3, application P1190097 for erection of 3 wind turbines with a blade tip of West Cathan House, Hayhill Road in Thornton Hall. And Fraser is going to speak to this.
Okay, thank you, Chair. This consent relates to a site at Hayhill Road in East Kilbride Thornton Hall for permission for 3 wind turbines, providing power to the adjoining distillery and to the wider grid. The proposal has been assessed against local and national planning policy, as well as within the context of the representations received in the responses to consultations. Of particular note in this are the objections from Glasgow Airport and the National Air Traffic Systems Limited, which confirmed the applicant has been unable to reach an agreement on a radar mitigation scheme. Section 6 of the report sets out potential impact that the proposals could have on landscape and visual amenity, and these haven't been addressed in the information supplied in the application. So therefore, for the reasons set out in paragraph 7.1 and is listed on page 19, the recommendation to the committee is that this application should be refused.
Thank you, Fraser. I'll open up for any discussion or debate. Councillor Graham Scott.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, I've got concerns over this one, and thanks, Fraser, for his report. My concerns are in relation to the radar mitigation scheme. I'm led to believe that negotiations are still ongoing between the applicant and Glasgow Airport in relation to a chargeable fee. I believe these are commercial negotiations. Again, Glasgow Airport are offering an amount of money as a part of a mitigation scheme, and also there's negotiations ongoing with the applicant. What concerns me with this one is that there might be a rush to judgment here because negotiations are ongoing, and I also have serious concerns in relation to what this may do to this business. There's been a £50 million investment in this distillery. I'm led to believe, obviously, I've not tried the product myself, that's a very good product. But more importantly than the product, there's 15 jobs at stake here, and the potential which we want companies to invest in green power and towards a net zero Scotland, that they are doing the right thing. They see this as a way of potentially expanding with even more jobs. So given the fact that there are jobs at stake, I mean, I'm quite happy to move a deferment to give more time for negotiations between the applicant and Glasgow Airport and NATS, because I believe that if Glasgow Airport get the figure they're looking for, they will start supporting this. So if I can get comments from Fraser and also comments, I'll be interested in the comments from my colleagues about the impact here and the potential mitigation, and hopefully we can give both parties more time to get negotiations ongoing again. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. I'll ask Fraser just to come in on that, and then I'll come back to see if you want to move that deferment. I'll ask Fraser just to come in first.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yeah, no, the application that we have here was submitted in 2019. There's been quite a considerable time in order to reach that agreement between the applicant and the National Air Traffic Control, as well as Glasgow Airport, and that's not been achieved to date. There obviously is the overriding issue around health and safety in relation to the application, but there's also another aspect that was taken into consideration about the visual impact of the proposal as well. The applicant is obviously, in terms of the decision of the committee today, they can resubmit. They can consider, they can have further discussions with the air traffic control, as well as provide that information on visual amenity. But effectively, I think we feel as if we have given the applicant sufficient time to provide the information required. Obviously, the distillery business and the operation of that activity will continue. Hopefully that will continue to provide jobs within the local area as well. But the applicant can come back in with a revised submission at some time if the committee go with the recommendation to refuse.
Thank you, Fraser. Councillor Scott, are you moving for a deferment?
Yes, I'll move a deferment, Chair, on the grounds of more time for negotiations between the applicant and Glasgow Airport and NATS.
Okay,
I'll
thank you.
leave the amount of time, what you think is a reasonable amount of time for a continuation of this. I'm prepared to negotiate on that.
Okay, thank you. I will just ask if you have a seconder, Councillor Scott, MD to second Councillor Scott's for a deferment. I'll come back to you, Councillor Scott, because I do have some people online, so I'm unsure if they're going to second you, so I'll come back to you. I'll take Councillor Bert Thompson, please.
Thanks very much there, Chair. I would just like to second Councillor Scott. He's got vast experience of these things and he's looked into it and thought about it. And I think even just with the economic benefits, it would be fair and reasonable, in my opinion, to give him a wee bit more time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. In the room, Councillor David Watson.
Thanks, Chair. It's just maybe a point for noting that in the consultation we've got down as Aldhouse and Chapelton Community Council, it should probably be Thornton Hall and Jackton Community Council, and no matter what happens here, can we make sure that they're consulted as in the Jackton Thornton Hall area? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. I'll make sure that Fraser takes that on board. Any further comments? No. Okay. Given that they do have the chance to resubmit and have further discussions and then bring this back for a resubmission, I will then refuse this application for the reasons already attached.
I'll second it.
We also have an amendment from Councillor Graham Scott, seconded by Councillor Bert Thompson. So we'll need to take that to the vote. So I'll ask Stuart just to run through some procedural issues and then we'll come to the vote.
Okay, so the amendment that has been proposed by Councillor Scott and seconded by Councillor Bert Thompson is to defer the application to allow more time for both parties to try and resolve the radar issues on the grounds that there's potentially jobs at stake. And the motion is to refuse the application for the reasons detailed in the report. Sorry, that's been proposed by Councillor Nelson and seconded by Councillor Convery. The vote is now active. If you can please indicate your voting preference. Thank you. It would appear that one member still hasn't voted. If you could please make sure that you've selected your voting preference. Thank you. Not easily enough. Yeah, sorry, there's still one member appears not to have indicated their voting preference. If you can please check one last time that you've selected your preference, thank you. Okay, I'm now going to close the vote. Okay, 11 members have voted for the amendment and 8 members have voted for the motion. I therefore declare the amendment carried. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. Okay, we will move on to agenda item number 4.
I need to get Antisi from you then, is that okay?
Agenda item number 4 is application P190587. It's a residential development for 12 detached dwelling houses and associated garages at Waterlands Road, Law, Carluke, and Fraser again will speak to this.
Thanks. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, no, this application seeks consent for 12 dwellings on a site adjacent to the West Coast Main Line. It's an undeveloped site, currently designated as a green network opportunity and a transport infrastructure opportunity in the adopted South Lanarkshire Local Development Plan. Responses from consultees and a representation received are set out in sections 4 and 5 of the report, while section 6 provides details of the assessment that was undertaken in terms of the development plan, which consists of the National Planning Framework and the Local Development Plan. In relation to the assessment against the policies in both of these documents, the application is considered to be unacceptable as it runs contrary to a number of statutory policies and, if developed, would also have a detrimental impact on the long-held aspiration for new public transport infrastructure serving Law and the surrounding area. The applicant has not provided sufficient information that would justify a departure from the approved policies, and in this context, for the reasons set out in paragraph 7.1 and on page 30 of the papers presented to committee, it is recommended that this application should be refused.
Thank you, Fraser. I'll open up for comments. Councillor David Shearer.
Hello, Chair. I would like to welcome this refusal. I'd also like to welcome the commitment by the Council and SPT to the future possibility of reopening of Law Station. I appreciate, and my constituents appreciate, that continued commitment to the station at Law. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Shearer. Any further comments? No, I will then refuse detailed plan permissions for the reasons stated. Everybody agreed? Thank you. Agenda item number 5 is application P200969. the erection of 3 dwelling houses and formation of vehicle access, Lanark Road, Braidwood, Kirlook and Fraser again.
Thanks, Chair. This application relates to a site on the A73 between Kirlook and Upper Braidwood, which was returned to a naturalised condition and is bisected by the Braidwood burn, and consent is sought for the erection of 3 dwellings. The proposal has been assessed against the relevant policies of the National Planning Framework and the adopted Local Development Plan, and the proposals are at variance with the Greenbelt policies in both documents, as well as a range of other policies, and the overall assessment is set out in Section 6 of the committee papers. The proposals as submitted do not provide sufficient justification to warrant a departure from the development plan, as they represent a form of sporadic development that, if approved, would be contrary to the wider objectives of the Greenbelt policies, and at the same time, the details on the proposed development raises issues on matters such as flooding, access and design, and as such, for the reasons set out in paragraph 7.1 and on page 43 of your papers, members are recommended to refuse this application.
Thank you, Fraser. Any questions or comments? No, I'll move to refuse detailed plan permission for the reasons stated.
Second it.
All agreed? Agreed, thank you. Agenda item number 6 is application P201268, demolition of farmhouse and associated buildings and erection of 11 dwelling houses with access road, parking provision and associated works in Mans Road, Stonehouse, Larkhall. Fraser?
Thanks, Chair. This application seeks planning permission to erect 11 detached dwellings on an agricultural land to the north of Stonehouse. The buildings on the site, although operational for agriculture and kennels, are in a relatively poor condition, and the applicant is seeking to remove these and to construct housing. 9 objections have been received in relation to the proposals, and these are summarised in Section 5, and the proposals have been assessed against the National Planning Framework and the South Lanarkshire Local Development Plan. In this context, it is considered that the proposals do not comply with the Greenbelt policies of the Development Plan, and that they would introduce housing that is not required in connection with an appropriate Greenbelt use, and the applicant has failed to demonstrate that appropriate access and surface water drainage arrangements can be provided. Taking the policy and practical considerations into account, the development would constitute an appropriate development on a sensitive Greenbelt site, and therefore, for the reasons set out in paragraph 7.1 and on page 53, it is recommended that members refuse this application.
Thank you, Fraser. I'll open up for any questions or comments. Councillor David Shearer online.
Thank you, Chair. Given that the development would appear to be contained within the original footprint of the farm, surely this site should be looked upon as already developed and therefore as a brownfield site and not a greenfield site. And given that there is pressure to redevelop brownfield sites, I don't understand why this is being refused. So could one of the officers please answer that for me? Thank you.
I'll ask for the Fraser just to clarify for you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. The site, although previously or used as a farmsteading, the proposals don't look to use the buildings that are actually there on site just now. There is ongoing agricultural as well as a kennel use, which would be appropriate uses within the Greenbelt. The policies within the National Planning Framework as well as in the Local Development Plan, they do allow for new types of development into Greenbelt locations which are appropriate or need to be within a Greenbelt location. This proposal here is effectively for an urban, almost suburban type of development that could be located and would preferably be located within the settlement itself. There are a range of sites that we have within Stonehouse as well as across the communities of South Lanarkshire. They would lend themselves to this form of development, and this isn't the only use that could go into this Greenbelt location. So that being the case, it falls foul of our own Greenbelt policies as well as the National Planning Framework as well. That there isn't a justification or an absolute requirement for housing on this site. And in addition to that, as I mentioned in the report, the access as well as the drainage arrangements around here they aren't suitable, they wouldn't be appropriate, and that being the case, it's led us to the recommendation for refusal.
Thank you.
Chair, if I could come back.
Supplementary, Councillor Shearer, yep.
Yeah, thank you. I thank Fraser for his reply there. I am concerned, though, that if we interpret PN4 and the other planning regulations so strictly, we are going to find ourselves in a situation of having derelict properties all over what was the Greenbelt or the remote or rural area, because purely on interpretation, they don't fit within the policy. And that is a concern going forward, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shearer. I will make sure your comments are noted. Are you looking for Fraser to come back in? I don't think Fraser can add anything in, but I'll ask him just to clarify any points.
Okay, no, thank you, Chair. No, I note your comments, Councillor Shearer, and I think that the Greenbelt policy doesn't sterilise sites. No, there are a range of other uses that are appropriate within Greenbelt locations, which need to be within a Greenbelt location. The purpose is there to encourage development within settlements and then to protect the environmental quality of the Greenbelt, but it's not necessarily about sterilising sites. We will look to engage with owners of sites like this to bring forward positive uses in them so that they become assets within our community. So the intention is not to sterilise sites, and we would look to provide appropriate opportunities for development.
Thank you, Fraser. Councillor Alec Allison.
Just following on from Councillor Shearer's comments, I think there is a great deal of concern as to what NPF4 is going to do in the rural area. Is it a brownfield site? Greenfield site is quite pertinent to what's happening here. During the training, it was indicated that how exactly the new policy was to be interpreted wasn't, can I say, clear, Fraser? And I'm wondering whether we're taking a particularly stringent look at this. This is what the third paper in a row where the new policy is basically leading to a refusal. And it was indicated that we may need some of these to go through the appeals process to get an indication as to how it is going to be looked on by the reporter. Is that the case here? Are we being particularly diligent in what we're doing to try and get a feeling of how we should be dealing with these in the future?
Thank you, Councillor Allison. I think you're absolutely right. It's a very different playing field with the NPF4, and it allows the reporter then to come back and it gives us a clear instruction on how we then implement NPF4. I'm not the planner, I am the chair, so I'll ask Fraser to come in and just to clarify.
Yeah, no, thanks, Chair. No, your point's well made, Councillor Allison, in terms of national planning framework. Some of the guidance is, it's still coming through. That in particular, though, will probably have a bigger bearing in terms of the next local development plan that we bring forward. In terms of this current application, it actually falls foul of our own Greenbelt policy as well as the national planning framework as well. So it's not necessarily the national planning framework in isolation here. Certainly there is the scope for these, this type of application to be tested through the appeal process, but I would be inclined to suggest that it runs I would recommend that it runs contrary to our own Greenbelt policy. And the issues around access as well as the drainage issues that exist on that site, I think there is the danger we are creating inappropriate forms of development that people can't get access to, that they don't have all the services that are required. I think that's the purpose of the Greenbelt policy, to try and encourage development into settlements itself and not sporadically across the wider Greenbelt areas. As I say, there are alternative uses that can be looked forward for farms that have fallen into disrepair. There are farms that that lend themselves to other economic uses and other activities as well. And we will seek to ensure that we are not looking to sterilise land through our development plan process as we move forward. But I would suggest that this is not the only use that could go into the site, and it's an inappropriate use in terms of the local and national policy.
Thank you. Any further comments? No, I will then move to refuse detailed plan permission for the reasons stated. Second, any otherwise minded? Thank you. Agenda item number 7 is application P221096, page 55 in your pack. Erection of a single-storey detached dwelling and double garage, Mousebank Road in Lanark.
Thanks, Chair. This application, it relates to a site that's 500 metres north of the urban edge of Lanark, seeks to introduce the fourth contemporary house into this location that sits adjacent to a bridge that crosses the Mouse Water. No objections have been submitted through the consultation and publicity process, but the proposal has been assessed against the relevant policies in the National Planning Framework and the Local Development Plan. In relation to National Planning Framework, the principle of this development does not comply with policies 14, 15 and 17, as it seeks to promote housing in a rural area. It doesn't provide a development that sits within a recognised settlement and is not related to a viable rural business or seeking to convert existing buildings. This also brings the development into contention with Policy 4 of the South Lanarkshire Local Development Plan, which covers greenbelt and rural areas and seeks to protect the amenity of the countryside and to guide development to identified housing sites and recognised settlements. So therefore, for the reasons set out in paragraph 7.1 and on page 63 of the committee papers, it is recommended this application should be refused.
Thank you, Fraser. I'll open up for any questions or comments. No questions or comments. I will then refuse detailed plan permission for the reasons stated.
I'll second it.
All agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Agenda item number 8 is application P221122, page 65 in your pack. Erection of a single dwelling house with associated access and parking, land at Peel Road in Thornton Hall.
Thanks, Chair. This application seeks consent for a single dwelling on an area of undeveloped designated greenbelt land and which has been assessed within the context of the National Planning Framework and the adopted South Lanarkshire Local Development Plan. 3 objections were submitted as part of the publicity process, along with an objection from Jackton and Thornton Hall Community Council, and the context of the representations has been covered in the papers presented to members and the assessment set out in the report. With regard to the National Planning Framework, approved by Scottish Parliament on February 13, 2023, this proposal does not fall into the categories of appropriate development as set out in paragraph 6.3, and in turn does not meet the requirements of policies 6, 14, 15 and 16 of the National Planning Framework, and must therefore be deemed as being contrary to the development plan. Policy 4 of the South Lanarkshire Local Development Plan also needs to be taken into consideration in assessing this application, and in this respect, given its greenbelt location, this proposal could not be considered as being a form of development that provides an appropriate location that protects and enhances the character and landscape setting of identified settlements. In addition to Policy 4 of the Local Development Plan, the proposal would be contrary to Policy GBRA 1, given the loss of a mature hedgerow along the frontage of the site, which would be required for the proposed development to meet roads and transportation requirements. Given the above, the proposal is contrary to the Local Development Plan policies, and therefore, for the reasons set out in paragraph 7.1 and page 74 of the officer's report, it is recommended this application should be refused.
Thank you, Fraser. I'll open up for any questions or comments. Councillor David Watson.
Thanks, Chair. I think, like Councillor Allison, I see the pattern developing here. I don't think I've been at a planning committee where so many refusals have been before us. But regarding this one, my understanding is that this would have been acceptable prior to MPF 4, and the applicant had ongoing discussions with the planning department and was under the impression that agreement had been reached, that everything had been done to make sure that this could be approved. And I'm just, again, probably following on from Alex's point of view, that National Planning Framework come in, it's an excuse to, a reason to knock back all these applications, and it looks as if it is going down to that, let's push it down to the reporter and see what they come back with. But I think it's an invidious position that the council's been put in and planning officers, that the guidelines isn't clear, and I think this just shows it up for the way this whole policy's been implemented. I need to say not by the council, but by the government. But so probably more comment than anything. But if you want to respond, feel free. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. And it is unfortunate that MPF4 superseded, and that's what we had to, or the planning authority and the council had to go with. So that's unfortunate, and it's nothing that the planning authority can do here. I suppose what we are trying to do here is tighten the ship in South Lanarkshire Council in the planning department, and I've been working closely with Fraser. And you will have seen quite a few refusals today. But that, again, is a belt and braces in South Lanarkshire that has been needed for so long. And that's where they will continue to make sure that this ship is sealed and it travels forward quickly. Fraser, I don't know if you want to come in on any of that.
No, thank you, Chair. Not much more to add to that, other than know that the proposal is also contrary to the local development plan, so it's not just the national planning framework itself. We will look to promote appropriate development in appropriate locations. It's not about the idea of closing the door to development. We just want to make sure it's in the right places, and we welcome the support of you as the committee in terms of ensuring that we get development into the right locations, make sure that we promote communities. And that will be a key aspect of the local development plan as we bring that forward as well. A lot of the applications we're dealing with today are legacies that sit from before the national planning framework was introduced. There are a number of applications that we'll be bringing forward to the committee, which were, as you say, are clearing the decks to some extent. But we will look to always try and promote development and work to applicants so that we have appropriate development in the right locations.
Thank you, Fraser. Any further questions or comments? Okay, I will then, recommendation is to refuse detailed plan permission.
I'll second it.
All agreed? Agreed, thank you. Moving on then to agenda item number 9, page 77 in your pack, is application P221503. It's the erection of the extension of 3 warehouses in Douglas and Lanark. Fraser?
Thanks, Chair. No, straightforward application this for an existing whisky maturation and blending site. No objections were received. As set out in section 6, the policy has been assessed in terms of national and local planning policy and did not raise any issues that would mitigate against the development being approved. So therefore, subject to the conditions and for the reasons set out in section 7.1, is recommended this application be approved.
Thank you, Fraser. Any questions or comments? No questions or comments. I think it's great to see for the local area, especially in Lanark and surrounding areas in Douglas in the rural area, and therefore I am happy to grant detailed plan permission based on the conditions attached.
I'll second it.
All agreed? Agreed, thank you. Agenda item number 10 is page 87 in your pack. Application P221746. Plan proposal for the change of use from vacant office to cafe bistro restaurant in New Lanark. And Fraser, please.
Thanks, Chair. This proposal, it seeks to change the consent of, it was a former office block that's lain vacant since 2018, situated in a Grade A listed building within the World Heritage Site, and it seeks consent, as you say, to establish a restaurant with an external seating area. The proposals don't raise any issues in terms of the policies in the national or local development plan. 6 letters of representation were submitted on issues such as built heritage, amenity and traffic, and these have been assessed in the application. And in this context, it is considered that via the implementation of conditions in relation to traffic management and the methods of ventilation for the restaurant, that this proposal should ensure the ongoing use of this vacant property and add to the tourism offer in the World Heritage Site. As such, subject to the conditions set out on pages 95 and 96, it is recommended this application should be approved.
Thank you, Fraser. Open for any questions or comments? No questions or comments. I think, again, this is great to see as well as something vacant in the heritage site at New Lanark, and I wish them well in their new venture. Therefore, I will have great pleasure in granting detailed plan permission subject to conditions.
I'll second that.
All agreed? Agreed, thank you. Agenda item 11. Councillor MacDonald? Yeah. Thank you. We'll shout you back in. Agenda item 11 is page 99 in your pack, application P221751. the use of vacant ground as external activity area associated with adjacent childcare premises at Blantyre Industrial Estate and Blantyre. Fraser.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, this is the applications to create an additional outdoor space for an existing childcare facility. The application is presented to the committee in line with the provisions of the approved scheme of delegation in relation to planning applications, but it does not raise any policy or practical considerations, and therefore, subject to the conditions set out on page 104 of the committee paper, is recommended that it be approved.
Any questions or comments? Happy to approve detailed planning permission.
I'll second it.
All agreed? Agreed, thank you. If somebody can just ask Councillor MacDonald to come back in. Agenda item number 12 is page 107 in your pack. Application P221764. Plan proposal for the erection of 12 flats with associated vehicle access, parking and landscaping in Hamilton. Fraser.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, this application relates to the site of a former bowling green within an established residential area and seeks consent for 12 flats. The development is proposed by West of Scotland Housing Association and seeks to provide a mix of social rented accommodation within the context of South Lanarkshire's Strategic Housing Investment Plan. The proposal is similar to a previous consent granted, but with a reduced number of parking spaces. And in this respect, while noting the representation received in relation to parking, it is considered that the site is well located for public transport, benefits from close access to services such as schools, healthcare, etc., and in terms of layout, meets the terms of the Council's residential design guide. The proposal also accords with the provisions of the National Planning Framework and Local Development Plan, and whilst not necessarily a determining planning issue, the proposals add to the supply of social rented housing in Hamilton, and this tenure is sought to be protected by the imposition of condition number 11. Therefore, subject to the conditions set out on pages 114, 115 and 116, it is recommended to the committee this application should be approved.
Thank you, Fraser. Any questions or comments? Councillor John Ross online.
Providing the item does go through, I would welcome it. It's an area that would benefit from more local housing. So I'm very happy to see it finally reach a stage where we've overcome any barriers to the site being used. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Any further questions or comments? Again, I think it's great to see some social housing in Hamilton and the use of this former building being brought back into some sort of use for the community. So I'd be happy to grant detailed plan permission subject to conditions.
I'll second it.
All agreed? Agreed, thank you. Agenda item 13 is page 119 in your pack. Application P221789. The formation of 2 house plots, Lockhart Mill Farm and Lanark.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, this application relates to a site approximately 1 kilometre north of Lanark, and as you say, seeks consent for 2 house plots in an existing field adjacent to a farm steading with related outbuildings. No adverse comments or representations have been received through the consultation and publicity process, but when assessed against the relevant policies set out in the National Planning Framework and in the adopted Local Development Plan, it's considered that this application would be contrary to the policies in both documents. The proposal does not comply with Policy 14 and 15 of the National Planning Framework, as it is not in an appropriate location and would run contrary to the national and local policy intent for development to be connected within communities, and in doing so reinforce and protect existing settlements. In addition to this, Policy 17 of the National Planning Framework does not support new housing in areas that are not allocated for housing. The National Planning Framework and the Local Development Plan does provide scope for the conversion of existing buildings or where it supports a viable rural business. But in this case, where the proposal seeks the formation of 2 housing plots, there is no justification to merit a departure from national and local policy. The applicant has provided information in relation to their personal circumstances, and while noting and having sympathy for the family arrangement, it is considered that this does not merit a departure from policy, but it is also noted that there could be opportunities to utilise or extend existing buildings at this location that would comply with the relevant planning policies. Therefore, for the reasons set out in paragraph 7.1 and on page 127 of the committee papers, it is recommended this application should be refused.
Thank you, Fraser. I'll open up for any questions or comments. No questions or comments. Therefore, I will move to refuse detailed plan permission for the reasons stated.
I'll second it.
All agreed? Agreed, thank you. Agenda item number 14 is page 129 in your pack, application P230015, the erection of community workshop with associated vehicle access yard, boundary treatments, parking and access at Hindford Road in Lanark.
Thank you, Chair. This application relates to land that sits within the complex of activities that operate from the former Lanark Racecourse and seeks permission for a community workshop that would be used as part of the preparations for the town's Lanimer celebrations. There were no adverse comments following the statutory consultation process, but 9 objections were submitted against the development, with a further 57 submitted in support, and a summary of this is set out in section 5. When assessed against the relevant policies in the National Planning Framework and the Local Development Plan, the proposed location for the workshop is acceptable, but in noting the representations that have been submitted from the adjoining equestrian business, a range of conditions are suggested that would control the use of power tools, the time that machinery could be used, and the design of the buildings to ensure that suitable levels of sound insulation are provided. It is anticipated that this will ensure that the equestrian business and the community workshop can operate in the same vicinity and that the suitable controls are in place to allow this to happen. Therefore, for the reasons set out in paragraph 7 and subject to the conditions on pages 140 and 141, it is recommended this application should be approved.
Thank you, Fraser. Any questions or comments? No questions or comments. Great piece of news for Lanark Lanimers, and I'm sure that they'll have plenty of work to do within their new premises. Therefore, I will grant detailed plan permission. Move for that. Everybody otherwise agreed? Agreed, thank you. Agenda item number 15, page 143 in your pack, application P230036. It's for the erection of a community enterprise centre, including office space, training kitchen, multi-purpose rooms and a bicycle workshop and retail, and associated access, parking, fencing and landscaping. Again,
can operate without any mutual detriment, and therefore for the recommended this application for approval, subject to the conditions set out on page 151 and 152.
thank you, Fraser. I'll open up for any questions or comments. Again, another piece of good news for Lanark as well. So I don't have any further business, but we'll grant detailed plan permission then based on the conditions he's attached. All agreed? Great, thank you. I don't have any items of urgent business. I thank you all for attendance this morning. Very quick meeting. Thanks again to the planning officers and Fraser for carrying out today's business as well. Have a good day. Thank you.